Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mayvar Tagar. Welcome to our 329th Supercommandos Going Super Commando episode of Mandovision, and I am your host, Nargai Tom. Thank you so much for checking out our small independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here. Make sure you find us on the socials at Mando_Vision on Twitter /X and Instagram. Just regular Mandovision at Blue Sky. And you can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Bucketheads, we are back. We are blazing our way through Season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. And we once again find ourselves under the cover of night to record another episode of the show. So again, I'm tempered down a little bit, as I would love to be very boisterous about this episode, because this is one that scratches that Mandalorian itch that I've had for some time now. And it's a fun one too, because it's a great callback to some early days of Star Wars, some of the great concept artwork of Ralph McQuarrie, all these things kind of coming to life in this episode. And so it's going to be a fun one to talk about, and I'm really excited to get to do so. As you probably know, it is the Super Commando episode of Star Wars Rebels, so obviously we got some ties to some Fett history, and I think that's the big thing that we'll talk about in the opening of the show is obviously, if you know your Star Wars history, Star Wars lore, the background of Boba Fett and kind of where he came from. This won't be breaking news or information for you, but yeah, initially, like, the genesis of Boba Fett back in the early days when they were kind of coming up with the plan, with the story for Empire Strikes Back, was Boba Fett was initially sort of conceived as this Imperial Supercommando, bathed in a white armor with a jetpack, and much like the characters look in this episode. That was the initial take on Boba Fett. He wasn't a bounty hunter yet. They hadn't come up with Mandalorians yet. They hadn't come up with a lot of that stuff. So, again, this is a great callback, heavily inspired by the Ralph McQuarrie concept art of The Empire Strikes Back, and you get to see it brought to life. There are action figures around to celebrate the Imperial Supercommandos and sort of their fun tie to history, and so it's very, very neat for us Mandalorian supporters to kind of see this all brought to life, and to kind of help fill in a chunk of Mandalorian history that we've been kind of getting teased on Mandalorian stuff in Rebels. They gave us like that little entry point with Fen Rao last season. And now we're kind of getting to know a little bit more, like what's been going on with the Mandalorians since the Clone Wars, And again, remember, when this season of Rebels came out, we didn't really know the fate of Mandalore. We didn't really know how that storyline resolved. It had maybe been discussed to some degree at conventions and things like that, but the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars didn't exist. Disney had canceled the show before they finished it. So we were sort of filling in blanks here, and now we find out that in the time of the Empire, some of the Mandalorian clans have gone full bore and supported the Empire and become sort of like their agents, their operatives, and doing their dirty work. And that is embodied in Gar Saxon, a character who, canonically speaking, came to life from the comic books, the Darth Maul, son of Dathomir comic. He was one of the loyalists to Maul when Maul was leading Mandalore, and so we transitioned him from comics, where he had like his bucket was, had the horns around the crown of the helmet. He's a big Maul guy, and now he sees an opportunity with the fall of Maul and the fall of Mandalore to gain power for himself at the hands of the Empire by being their agent, their lapdog, and obviously this runs in counter to Fen Rao and his people. So Mandalorians killing Mandalorians, kind of this a time-old tradition amongst those people. But we do get some fun background about Sabine's family and their role, and their part of things. Again, part of Clan Vizsla. We know that, but so is Gar Saxon. So later in the episode, when Gar, talks about Sabine's mom happily siding with the side of the Empire after Sabine leaves the Imperial Academy in disgrace and dishonors her family, these are things like this is big chunks of information that we're getting that are super, super important and super, super fun for us to kind of foreshadow some of the things that are coming. So let's go ahead and get our episode particulars out of the way here. This is Star Wars Rebels, Season 3, Episode 7, Imperial Supercommandos. Original air date November 5th, 2016. The episode is directed by Stuart Lee, written by Christopher Yost, and of course Stephen Melching on story editing. Our plot: after losing contact to the protectors of Concord Dawn, Sabine, Ezra, Fenrau investigate. They quickly discover that the Imperial Mandalorians have taken over the station. Taken over is kind of a strong way to describe it. They really just kind of blew it up and killed all the protectors of Concord Dawn, Fenrau's people. So a little bit of a misleading plot. Our primary cast for this week's episode: Taylor Gray is Ezra Bridger, Vanessa Marshall is Harrison Dula, Freddie Prinze Jr. is Kanan Jarrus, Tia Sakar is Sabine Wren, Steve Blum is Zebo Orielos, Dave Filoni is Chopper, Keon Young is Commander Sato, Kevin McKidd is Fenrau, and Ray Stevenson, that's right, Balin Skull himself, is the voice of Gar Saxon. In case you didn't know, Kevin McKidd, Ray Stevenson starred together on Rome back in the day, the Rome series on HBO. God, that was forever ago. I think that was like 2004 or 5 or something. So kind of fun that they're kind of back in their role, and then they're kind of playing. I guess you could make a comparison between the Mandalorians and the Roman Empire, I suppose, specifically like the militaristic aspects of it. So just kind of a fun little note there. All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk about the episode. Let's get into it a little bit more in depth. You know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off.
You're going to have to relocate the covert.
This is the way.
This is the way.
So we open up with Sabine hanging out with Fenrau, another Mandalorian. And again, Sabine's been isolated from her people for some time, but she still is Mandalorian. She still believes in her people. Fenrau views her differently, knowing that she is Clan Vizsla, and now with these rebels and not helping her people. But they're playing a game, Kubikad, which I think originated back in the Karen Travis novel, so it was kind of fun to see it realized here on the television show. Let me see, I got the basic description of it is a holographic Mandalorian strategy game with a cube-shaped board and grid lines. Each player had 4 knives to move on the surface, strategically placed until their opponent's pieces were captured. So, pretty cool to see that thing brought to life. Again, if you don't know, I am a massive fan of the Karen Travis Mandalorian books, the Imperial Commandos series, the Republic Commandos series. All of them. I absolutely adored the culture that she gave to the Mandalorian people in there. There are elements of it that have made its way into the new canon, and it's taken me a long time to kind of come around on the core canon that is the Mandalorians, because I did love what they did in those books so much. But I have accepted the new canon as all right, I'll deal with it. It's fine. Like I said, because there are elements. You can make the two things sort of jive if you fill in some blanks, if you fill in some spots, And sometimes that's what you got to do when you have a head canon like I do, where I just too much stuff lurking around the brain, and sometimes it all just seeps in and goes in weird different directions. So Sabine's there because I think she wants some contact with some Mandalorians, but she's also trying to bring his faction in line with the rebellion, have them come over, join the rebellion, join the fight against the Empire, because what has the Empire ever done for the Mandalorians? And Fenn's in an interesting position because he's sort of a political prisoner, right? As Kanan describes him later, as a grumpy guest. But Fenn isn't really worried about the rebellion versus the Empire. He believes that they will outlast all these things because that's what Mandalorians have always done. They've gone back before the Republic even existed. He talks about that in this episode. So he has no real interest in joining the rebellions. He doesn't really view Sabine as worthy of the protectors of Concord Dawn joining their side. And he's a little high and mighty about it, and that's fine. The perception of the rebellion is what it is, and I don't think they were too worried about the optics at the time of things. We are quickly interrupted when it is revealed that the rebellion has lost contact with the forces on Concord Dawn. Fenral finds this very disturbing, but the rebellion is fearful that the protectors are trying to draw them into a trap, possibly in order to free Fenral. So they decide to send a team, reconnaissance only. Don't land, observe, report back. It's going to be Sabine, it's going to be Chopper, it's going to be Ezra, and Fenral talks his way aboard, and Hera goes along with it as long as he's wearing binders. But this is the Mandalorian we're talking about, friends. So once they are alone in the Phantom 2, and they arrive at Concord Dawn, Ezra gets distracted by seeing the moon, shattered in so many pieces, and Fenral gets the drop on him. Then the drop on Sabine, and they wake up and find themselves handcuffed to each other on the surface of Concord Dawn, and Fenral gone. Well, they find Fenral not too far away, looking over a cliff down onto where his base used to be, and it's a smoking ruin. None of his soldiers are there. Looks like they've all been massacred, killed, and fairly recently. An Imperial probe droid makes its presence known, and they do dispatch it, but not before we see the Empire has arrived. Or at least that's the report we're getting from Chopper. But when Sabine lowers her viewfinder down and gets to see what's happening, we see figures rocketing in on jetpacks. Our first view of the Imperial Supercommandos, and our first a kind of callback, I should say, to the Mandalorians of old that we know from the Clone Wars. Cool jetpack stuff, good times. So basically, the Imperial Supercommandos are going to pursue them, going to eventually capture Ezra, but Ezra sort of distracts and buys Sabine and Fenral time to escape. They haven't noticed those two yet. Ezra sort of provides the distraction. He and Chopper get captured, and they get interrogated by by Gar Saxon, who makes his canonical animated series debut. The late great Ray Stevenson playing Gar Saxon. So good stuff here. It's a fun bit. Ezra does his sort of Ezra things, lying, claiming that he's he's there for salvage. He works for Hondo. Then he goes back to calling himself Lando, and he made a deal with some pirates. And then eventually, he comes around to saying the name of Fenral. That Fenral sent him to check things out, and that gets Gar Saxon's attention, because he was very disappointed to attack this base and not find Gar Saxon there. I'm sorry, to not find Fenral there. It's late at night, friends. Bear with me. So this is when we find out that Gar Saxon didn't act on orders of the Empire. He's sort of acting with impunity on behalf of the Empire. Fenral was always a target of his, and it wasn't on some specific order. He was coming for him. Gar was coming for Fen regardless of Imperial orders or anything like that. I forget the exact words that Gar calls himself. I think he's like the Vice Chancellor of Mandalore or something along those lines. It's quite pretentious. That is it's a certainty. Sorry, his official title is Imperial Viceroy of Mandalore. So yeah, he's sort of stepped up to fill his power vacuum. But he's obviously a puppet. But the Empire's kind of letting him go and do his things because he's doing it in their name on behalf of them. He is a puppet, but also a world-class suck-up. But we're going to get more into the Mandalore stuff later on in this season. We really do get kind of deep on it, and it is a lot of fun. So as Ezra and Gar are going back and forth, and Gar is threatening Chopper, at one point, Ezra uses the Force to kind of nudge his blaster out of the way so he doesn't shoot Chopper. And then that's when Ezra reveals himself to be a much more valuable prisoner, because he is Jedi. It is at this point that Sabine and Fen go back. Again, Fen not so keen on rescuing who he calls not his people. Doesn't care about the boy, doesn't care about the droid. His people are dead. He wants to kind of go back, get away, regroup, right? Let the rebels do the rebel things. But Sabine and him sort of come up with a plan. And as we find out, as Sabine and Chopper and Ezra make their escape out of Gar Saxon's lair there at the old burned down base of Fen Rao, Fen Rao takes off in the Phantom 2 and leaves them behind to fend for themselves. We get a great sequence after it seems all hope is lost and that the Imperial Supercommandos have the drop on our heroes. Sabine is able to do a frequency burst to cause a distraction, and they're able to take off in the hijacked jetpack that Sabine has taken for herself a little bit earlier in the episode. So now we have Sabine holding on to Ezra, Chopper with his rocket flying through canyons on Concord Dawn, and they're looking for the ship of Gar Saxon because Fen Rao left in theirs. So they're trying to get away. There's no real plan here other than to escape and report back of what's going on Concord Dawn. And we get a great pursuit. And of course, Gar Saxon and his Supercommandos are able to close the distance faster because obviously Sabine is holding Ezra. That's weighing her down. And they don't quite know where they're going either. So that's interesting too. But it's a great sequence with Ezra hanging on to Sabine and then flying around and landing on Chopper. It's a great back and forth. I really enjoyed the flight sequence here. Good action in the canyons. I thought it was really, really neat. Meanwhile, Fen Rao in space, on the verge of jumping into hyperspace and getting away and starting a new life or going back to Mandalore or whatever he's thinking about. It begins to dawn on him just what Sabine... I guess we should just say what he tells her at the very end of the episode is that it dawns on him that she is, exuding everything that's Mandalorian by being loyal to her friends and to Phoenix Squadron and everyone in her circle. And so he reevaluates his opinion of her as a Mandalorian, and he's going to go back and aid them now. So we get a great confrontation with Fen Rao returning in the Phantom 2, laying waste to the Supercommandos, laying waste to their ship. And then this allows us to have a great fight, a hand-to-hand combat, Mandalorian style, between Sabine and Gar Saxon. It's a great sequence. It's really well executed, really well done. Sabine seems to get the upper hand, but again, she's not looking for victory. She's looking to escape and to get away. So she uses her jetpack, flying towards the Phantom 2, which is taking off towards space. Ezra's on board. Chopper's on board. They're making their getaway. She got pulled back by Gar. That's what that's how a lot of this hand-to-hand began. But she's rocketing back towards the Phantom 2. Gar grabs his rifle, takes careful aim, and blasts her jetpack. But as she's about to fall to the surface, Ezra reaches out and is able to grab her hand. With his own hand, not the Force. Pulls her aboard. She's bummed that her jetpack has been blown away. You may recall that last season, at the Chopper Base episode, she mentioned always wanted to have a jetpack. And she got one. And now she doesn't have one again. But our heroes make their escape. Gar Saxon's stranded on Concord Dawn, at least for now. And we get the moment between Sabine and Fen where he admits his realization. He admits he misjudged Sabine. And, his protectors of Concord Dawn are no more. And he's found a new Mandalorian friend that is worthy of his, I don't know if companionship's the word I want to use, but is worthy of him in a sense that maybe her cause is worth his investment, is worth his time, is worth his loyalty. So Fen Rao comes aboard. We now make another ally, though he is significantly less without the protectors of Concord Dawn, but he is a face for other Mandalorians to see, and that adds some credibility to the rebellion. And again, these are things that will pay off down the road. We're going to get there. We're kind of laying the track to get to Mandalore and some important Mandalorian storylines coming up in this season of the show. So really good stuff in this episode. I love it. I really love the Mandalorian stuff. You guys know me. That's my jam. Give me more Mandalore. And hell, let's fill in some of the blanks in this Mandalorian timeline. And I think it's gonna be good timing as far as watching these episodes, and then getting, we're not too far away from the Mandalorian and Grogu movie coming out, so fun to revisit these things. It'll kind of help give us some information to kind of revisit and talk about some of the things in the last couple of seasons of the Mandalorian, and project, maybe plot a course for what may come for the Mandalorian people moving forward. So again, I like this episode quite a bit. I give it 8 buckets really easily. It's not like super deep, but we get teased with a lot of background on Sabine and a lot of foreshadowing of things to come later in this season. So I find it very, very strong, very, very entertaining, and I hope you guys liked it as much as I did. I love the jetpack sequence through the canyon. I loved the hand-to-hand combat between Gar and Sabine, and I loved Ezra at the end of the episode saying that Mandalorians are crazy, because that does track. Whether it's the Legends Mandalorians or the canon Mandalorians, they are a little on the cray-cray side. All right, Bucketheads, let's get out of here. Let's wrap this puppy up. We'll be back next week to talk more Star Wars Rebels. Go out there, be great Star Wars fans, kind, supportive, respectful, understanding, compassionate, empathetic, all the things. And hit us up on the socials at Mando_Vision, Twitter/X and Insta. You can find me at MandoVision on Blue Sky. And you can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And if you're on those platforms to give out reviews, sweet, 5 stars. They help us tremendously. Truly appreciate everyone who takes the time to do that. Bucketheads, you are the best. We'll be back next week to talk to you some more. And again, remember, we are currently recording a bunch of episodes in advance to cover some, I shouldn't say obligations, but some availability challenges that I will have in the month of September. So if there is breaking Star Wars news, stay tuned for special episodes and bonus shows dropping to talk about all that stuff. All right? So main episodes will focus on Star Wars Rebels, and you'll get bonus shows for any kind of news that might break if I am able to discuss and record with you guys about it. All right? Hope that's not too weird and vague. Anyways, we'll be back next week for sure to continue watching Star Wars Rebels. In the meantime, remember, this podcast, it can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Just did the castle run in 12 parsecs. Not if you round down, buddy. Yeah.
Purple guy, Mando girl, and Ezra Bridger. My, look how you have grown.